be asking, we need to get some of this kind of discussion going at the public information phase and have our developer talk about, because they said in their plan that they will be matching the specifications of one of these grid expansion plans. But when we asked them, and some of you may have asked today at the open house meeting, what exactly is the relationship of Badger Coulee and CapEx 2020 to this larger plan? How does that fit into, you know, for example, if I can get by with investing in a system that looks like this, right? And I can meet my local needs and I can meet state needs, and I don't, you know, at this point in juncture in the economy, I really have a hard time justifying something like this if it's not going to directly meet my community's needs or my state's needs. And it follow. So we really, that discussion needs to take place. George?
You also have to remember that coal out west is called Western coal. It's low sulfur, but it's also a lower BTU. I don't know if any of you were involved with the ash thing having to do with Genoa G3 here the last couple of years, but they were putting in scrubbers and people didn't like where they were going to go with the ash over there for probably a really good reason. And then before the scrubbers, they could use 90% of it to mix into concrete, but then after that they couldn't because there was too much lime and other heavy metals, blah, blah, blah. And so they decided to go with Western coal. And what they're discovering on the projection is Eastern coal is going up. China is actually importing Eastern coal, so it's gone up quite a bit. G3 switches to Western coal, and they're discovering that it's going to be cheaper to ship electrons from out west where the regulatory oversight is lower. It's easier to build a plant where they're digging it out of the ground, and because it's lower BTU and freight rates are up, it's cheaper to burn it there and send it by 345s and God knows what else. Yeah, we are the transmission state.
But isn't that a good thing? I mean, isn't it a good thing that then our rates are down and we don't have the cost of transporting the coal here?
Yeah, well, but we're downwind too. I mean, you got football. And, you know, we should be, I think, okay, my personal opinion is we should be building one more coal plant in this country. You know, we don't need it. Somebody would build a damn windmill over here. What's wrong with you people?
No, peak demand is the time you'd have more solar, when people are burning air conditioners and stuff.
Well, that's true.
So,
you do get more, so that's true.
So if people had solar things on their roofs, they'd have it right there instead of having to ship it all over the place.
Just we're on the grid kind of thing. Another piece to throw in that's good for us to start to learn about is the question of there's three basic legs that the proposal stands on. First one is reliability, which we talked about briefly, which has to do with coming up with demand projections and designing an appropriate system to provide us our needs for electricity in the coming years. Actually, we don't know whether they're talking about a regional reliability criteria or in-state criteria alone. That we need to get on the table. The second component is the economics, which has to do with the cost returns that would come from, as George is referring to, bringing wholesale energy into the state, literally importing potentially a very large amount of so-called wholesale electricity from this market that's all linked together. The facts on that since 2004, since the Wisconsin has been participating in wholesale energy purchases, is that it has not lowered our rates. Our rates are the highest in the Midwest on the residential, and the role of transmission costs in that seems to be there. Also generation. But the other component in it is the renewable energy angle, which you can hear about, bringing in high-quality renewable energy from the Midwest, where our board had a very long and lively discussion with ATC, because this is a value that we hold very highly, both in terms of the coal issue and in terms of local, of our own self-reliance and being able to look at a future of energy use that will not send our dollars out of our community, or in the case of Wisconsin, send energy consumption dollars out of Wisconsin into Minnesota or whatever states we're importing energy from. So the question we posed to American Transmission they came to talk to us, or at our invitation, was how are we going to how are we going to ensure that the renewable energy component in this transmission addition has a net gain in terms of environmental gain, i.e., what is the carbon footprint going to be like? It's a little easiest way to imagine this is that if we build wind generation, so we have more output from wind generation, we're only going to get an environmental gain from that if we slow down or cut back on the fossil fuel consumption. So obviously, for us to have an integrated and effective plan over time, we have to have it's called an audit of some kind of area. Now, is that area going to be Wisconsin? Is that area going to be Wisconsin and Minnesota? Is that area going to be Wisconsin and Minnesota and North Dakota and South Dakota and Illinois and Michigan? Well, the Badger Coulee and CapEx lines would be a very good place to start because this is the earliest part of this grid plan that's being constructed. So we thought it was reasonable to say, how are you going to monitor this? How are you going to ensure that there is a net environmental gain? They told us that this was an informal public meeting and they did not discuss matters of need or specificity, technical specificities in the public context. We reminded them that, of course, the town of Stark was holding a meeting and they were in a formal public meeting, but we kind of went around and we got that answer from them as many people on the board can attest.
So Rob, just a couple of comments on that. At the meeting when the question was asked, well, how much of the electricity moving on the transmission lines is wind-generated electricity, they said they could not say for sure how much it would be and that we have to ask that question of the utilities.
Public service.
And yet when they promote the Badger Coulee line to the public, they won't emphasize the amount of wind energy that's going to move on that line. They'll frame it that way, but if you press for an answer, you cannot get a specific response as to what percentage will actually be on that line. And one other